Okay, everyone, thanks so much for joining us. We're excited to have you here for our Passion and Practice. I'm really excited to welcome Jeremy Gold with us today. While Jeremy was at Govs, he was always very interested in music and very involved in music. And it's been exciting from afar to watch how Jeremy's continued to stay involved, but obviously sort of bring that into a business side of things. And as a music lover myself, I'm fascinated to sort of learn more about the backside and the marketing side of everything. So with that, I'm excited to welcome Jeremy and thank him so much for being here.
Thanks, Samantha. I appreciate you. All right, let's jump in. I'm going to pull some visuals up here to guide our conversation. Okay. So, I'd like to start by giving a little bit of background on the music industry. I think how we got to this current state of the music industry is helpful to understanding how we currently market artists. Um, some disclaimers, if I could. I would say, first of all, music is a deeply personal listening experience. I think probably everybody on this call listens to music differently. It represents different memories and times and places. So, marketing is really actually quite difficult because different audiences and different types of artists um, connect with their fans in different ways. My second disclaimer is marketing is not a replacement for great music. So if you're a an artist or a musician, my first advice is always focusing on creating a great product and spending, much of your early career uh, in the woodshed, in the workshop, making great songs and making great music. My last disclaimer is if this gets a little bit confusing, it's because we're talking about a very convoluted and archaic music business. So I'm going to start by talking about some background on the music business, and I want to talk about um, some threats currently for independent artists, for artists making a living, and how they can survive in what I would now call the streaming economy era of the music business. And then I'll use all that information to talk about how you actually market artists. So before we get to that, I'll give a quick background on me. I graduated from Govs in 2011. When I was at Govs, I was lucky enough to be on stage a lot. I was able to play the drums and play a lot of music and participate in jazz band and orchestra and Friday morning meeting band. And I think that exposure to music is really a driving force to how I've spent my career down here in Nashville. So I have to say that first. Um, I ended up going to Belmont University here in Nashville and graduated in 2015. I've been here since. Belmont, for those who don't know, has a fantastic music business program, probably one of the best in the country. So they are multiple degrees there for everything from audio engineering for how to record albums and work in a studio to um, how record labels work um, and the full business side of the music industry. So it's a fantastic program and has a lot of access to Nashville's Music Row, which is literally down the street. Out of college, I spent 2 years at Warner Music Nashville in the digital marketing department, which is a record label. We'll talk a little bit in a second what record labels do. I had an artist that his name was Cale Dodds. I had an artist that I was working with outside of my record label job who ended up signing a record deal, and that was my motivation to jump to artist management. So I was at Starstruck Entertainment, which is an artist management company still in Nashville. I was the digital director there, oversaw the digital marketing team, and was a manager to a few artists at the time. And then after 5 years in management, I started my own business. So I've had my current business, Alchemy Artist Services, for about 4.5 years. Um, we'll talk about like what all of these words mean, but you can think about my company as uh, marketing services for record labels, artist managers, and independent artists. We sort of started off with white label services, what you see at the bottom, which basically means we get hired to understaffed teams. An artist maybe doesn't have a full marketing team in-house, so they want a dedicated team 365 around a huge release or a big album cycle or a big tour. And we often get brought in for those 6, 9, 12-month projects. In the last couple of years, we've shifted our business to focus on direct to fan, tour marketing, and catalog marketing, which we'll talk more about in depth. But there's an interesting opportunity right now in the music industry and how we're marketing artists to create like a deeper, more direct, uh, meaningful connection between artists and fans, and actually put more money back in the artist's pocket. So that's the reason for our shift. Into those services. But we'll talk about a little bit more about what they mean. Let's do a little bit of music business 101. So every traditional artist team looks something like this. The artist manager is essentially the nucleus of the operation. They're the last line of defense between the outside world, the rest of the team, and the artist. They're sort of the entrepreneurial right-hand person running the entire business, making sure all the parts talk to each other. Most artists, when they either sign some sort of record or publishing deal, will usually get business manager who manages all of the money. That's sort of standard. Booking agents, of course, are in charge of booking you for your live events. They take 10% for that. And then record labels and publishers, this is sort of sheds a little bit of, it has to do a lot with how copyright works in music. So you can think about the publisher as the person who is representing the lyrics and the melody of the song that was written, either by the artist or a songwriter. So that is one copyright. So that the lyrics that you put on a sheet and turn in after a day of co-writing in Nashville, and the demo that you turn in with it, that's one copyright. And then the record label is the one who actually pays for the creation of the master recording, which is a second copyright. So what you're hearing on Spotify or hearing over the radio or in the speakers at your favorite restaurant is both a master recording and a composition. And there's two different parties that represent and exploit those parts of the copyright. Lastly, my business sort of sits in this outside artist services bucket. So oftentimes you'll find what I do inside of a record label. We're often mirroring what these record labels are doing, but with more flexible contracts, usually for cheaper and more accessible fees than what you would get out of a record deal. And this is true for other marketing agencies, influencer agencies, PR agencies, branding agencies. So you can sort of think about this extra bucket between record labels and artist services, where artists can pick and choose what they find is important to them or what they need, which is kind of a new trend in the 21st century for independent artists. You don't have to sign a record deal to have them take 80% of your master. You can and all of the marketing and promotion that goes with it, you can sort of piece together a team based on what you need and what is important to you. So let's talk about some of the major shifts happening in the music industry currently. Actually, as of this week, we're seeing settlements between the major record labels and some of the large artificial intelligence companies that have built huge libraries of AI music. The hurdle and risk with artificial intelligence in the music industry, there's obviously lots of threats with artificial intelligence in general, but a couple ways that this is threatening to independent artists or artists trying to make a living is, first of all, AI is using training data to create the music that a user is trying to create on the platform. In other words, you give an AI, a program tons and tons of information about how to make a song. So there's a company called Suno. Suno is the most popular of these AI music companies right now. In Suno's training data, it has become clear it used a lot of copyrighted recordings or master recordings that were owned by a record label or an artist already. So if you follow how artificial intelligence works, that probably means that there's new AI music being created based on material that was already copyrighted. And there isn't an infrastructure in place for artists or record labels currently to license that properly. So they're working through like, how do we make money off of this? And how do we stop them from just flooding all of the streaming services with AI music to produce our human art? Um, that's the scary part about, I think, AI for artists. Um, Second, we are now 25 years into social media platforms and about 15 years into streaming. What we've sort of cornered ourselves walked ourselves into here is that all of these large tech companies like Spotify, like Apple Music, like Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube have these huge repositories of artist data and of audience information. Um, the problem is that not, a lot of that the artists who participate on those platforms don't have direct ownership or transparency into that data. So you've built a following in all of these places. You've gained 1 million subscribers on YouTube. You've gained 1 million followers on Spotify and built your monthly listenership up, but you don't really know who those people are, and you definitely don't own the data. So this is a huge problem uh, that's being worked out right now, and we'll talk more about what you would do with that data if you did have access to it. Related, the economics on streaming have really not worked out so far for independent artists. So we'll talk about like the stream rate and how much an artist actually makes on streaming. But we're finding that catalog music that's just familiar to people and has existed for years and been hits on the radio for the last 50 years, is actually just doing better than anything new. So it's really hard for new artists to actually build up a new revenue source in streaming. Um, and then lastly, as we said about socials, social media, the problem with it, the siloed audience information there is that we're now seeing companies like TikTok who are potentially being shut down by the government, or Facebook, who is getting sued for giving away user data. It's creating this risk for artists where all of the following that they've built over the years could go away. So there you can think about your following as rented and not owned. And one of the major um, suggestions my company and services that my company is working on is creating more owned audiences for artists to combat these rented audiences on social media. Um, so how did we like get to streaming as our current model? You have to remember that streaming, that Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, these are all reactions to privacy. I'm sorry, piracy. Piracy became when Napster disrupted CDs and physical music in the late 90s and early 2000s. It became so popular that the record labels basically had to give in and settle for iTunes and 99-cent downloads. And ever since then, even when Spotify built an audience and has these, hundreds of millions of music listeners on there, um, it's not creating the revenue that we were quite hoping it would, in comparison to what we were making on physical music. But we kind of had to settle for something that was not piracy, and we're sort of still paying the still paying for that 25 years later. I think we already talked about how most artists make their music, but again, you're making music off of the recording, you're making music off of the song that you've written. Of course, touring is a huge revenue driver for most artists. Sometimes it's the most dominant most dominant way to make money. And while they're on the road, they're often selling merchandise and using brands to alleviate the cost of those tours, which can get expensive. So brand partnerships is also an important part of making a living as an artist. I want to focus like for a second on how much an artist actually makes in streaming and why this is a real problem. And this is going to get into what can artists do to fight this? How can artists market themselves differently so they can actually make a living in this environment? So if you look at 1 million streams on Spotify, generally, what happens is those streams go into this giant pool of money, and that money is broken up every single month based on market share. It's called a pro rata model. Um, so Spotify's paying roughly 0.003 to 0.005 cent per stream. The difference in streams has to do with who's streaming. Is it a subscriber? Is it somebody who is on a family plan? Is it a person who's on the free model? Each of those types of listeners has different per stream rates attached to them. So these streams go into this giant pool, and then they're divvied up by how much by how much market share artists or master recording owners have. The problem with that for independent artists is that the major record labels own something like 75 to 80% of that pool. So not only do they own a huge majority of the money being paid out, they also are able to negotiate direct licensing deals that independent artists cannot negotiate with these streaming services. So Universal Music Group has their own rate. So you see this 0.003, 0.005. There's a couple of major record labels, Universal, for instance, who we don't know what the number is, but we know that they have a different rate than everybody else. So if you're an independent artist trying to make a living, you can't call up Spotify and ask them for an increased rate. You have no leverage. But these massive artists with huge catalogs and huge master recordings and huge artists, these record labels with these huge artists, and with that audience, can go to Spotify and ask for a better rate. So this is making independent artists and marketers really nervous. There's a lot of conversation that streaming is a loss leader. A loss leader meaning this is just a marketing tool now. So you're on Spotify and Apple Music because you need someone to listen to get to know your catalog and the music and the single that you're putting out, hopefully the hit song that you have. But we're now not thinking about it as a revenue tool, and I think that's a huge problem. And it's kind of sad when you think about 1 million streams. That's a lot of streams. So the other part of I'm picturing a lot of this. I'm talking about a lot of this through the lens of an independent artist. So you've got this streaming world where they can't necessarily make a living. They don't have a lot of leverage. All of that data is siloed. And then you start to, fall into these trends around TikTok and Instagram and Facebook where you know that you need to build a following and you know that you need to post a bunch of videos and you know that you need to get fans there. But the unfortunate reality is that algorithmic dependent chase, that sort of content treadmill is all for naught if at the end of the day you can't really convert those people to buy tickets or stream your music. The conversion rate, as someone who's worked in social media for a really long time, the conversion rate on a lot of these platforms is pretty weak. So you're not going on Instagram, anybody on here, whatever your social media platform of choice is, you're not going on there to be sold something or to seek out music. If the content gets put in front of you, you can, maybe discover somebody, and hopefully it's another 10, 15, 20 times you see their name that you start to become a fan and realize maybe you connect with the music, and then you maybe connect with the story. But it takes a lot of touch points on socials to really build an audience that converts to actual revenue if you're an independent artist. So my company, and I think what the next phase of artist marketing is going to look like is owned audiences. So audiences that, as opposed to Meta, TikTok, and Spotify, it's owning your email information, it's owning your SMS text information. It's using things like CRM. A CRM is just a database of your fans that you can communicate with unfiltered, outside of any algorithm, in the way that you want, and create unique experiences for your fans that's deeper than just videos that you're posting around a trend, or um uh, tour updates, for what your list of tour dates for the summer. It gives you an opportunity to build something much deeper. um so I'm a believer that like 100 true fans is much more powerful than 10,000 passive listeners. So like in this world, you have this streaming service that doesn't pay. You have these social media companies that don't really let you know much about your audience. And all of those could go away at any moment. And then you have these major record labels eating up the streaming revenue and flooding fans with so much content, with huge marketing budgets, that being an independent artist, it's bleak. So what will happen? What is the future of this, and how does an independent artist make a living and survive? Um, I think the answer to this is direct ownership of your fans, is creating owned fan communities. Just like everybody subscribes to Netflix, I think that there's going to be a world where we're subscribing to our favorite artists. Um, so while we may not subscribe to 50 of them, and where Spotify might be feeding us the latest Casey Musgrave song that we didn't know about, I think there's also going to be a layer of engagement with your favorite artists, where you're paying on a monthly basis or an annual basis to receive exclusive content or invites to exclusive events or live streams, and the ability to buy merch that you couldn't buy anywhere else, or creative goods or posters that you're only getting if you're a part of that community. Um, Jimmy Iovine, the founder of Interscope Records, said that, this is the guy who started Beats by Dre, that got acquired by Apple Music. And he said, I think that streaming is minutes from being obsolete. And his answer to how to sustain is direct ownership. The ones that survive are going to be the ones that build their own cultural hangers. So I'm talking a lot about the woes of the macroeconomics of the music industry, but I'm actually pretty optimistic about this future. I think that there's a lot of resources for independent artists. There's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of free ways to connect with your fans and build a line of communication with them. So I think that this is actually a more promising future for the artists that we want to support and to sustain in our world. Um, but let's go back to the big evil music record labels for a second. I did work at a major record label, and I do work with a lot of major labels still for artists that I support. And the way that my company is positioned, we work with both independent artists and these established artists, and it kind of gives us this unique position where we can understand what the major labels are doing and sort of feed that back to our indie artists. And it kind of gives us a nice sandbox to play in, and give back to these artists trying to build their infrastructure from scratch, while also being on the cutting edge of what they're doing, of what major labels are doing to break artists. And this is important because if you look at the biggest artists of the last few years, the Billie Eilishes, the Sabrina Carpenters, the Chappell Roans, those are major label artists. And it's not to say that those are the only artists out there, but the major labels are still successfully making superstars. So how they do that, I think, is really important. So we were talking about, to get into this, we were talking about oversaturated social media platforms. Well, you have these major record labels to thank for that. If you feel like you're constantly being flooded with content, or maybe you remember when Taylor Swift or Sabrina Carpenter was on tour and you kept seeing these same moments over and over again. Well, these major record labels have these huge teams that are taking hundreds or thousands of pieces of content and building out like what we call clipping farms, which is making mass amounts of fake accounts and mass amounts of short form videos, TikToks, Reels, vertical clips, and trying to flood the fan bases and the potential listeners of their artists to gain attention. So we're talking here, these record labels spend money to manufacture attention in hopes that that attention converts to streams. So they're paying these clipping farms, they're paying influencers to people with established accounts or profiles to post about the artist's release or make content with the artist's song in it. Um, the model often is with these record labels is actually using TikTok and um, social platforms as a testing ground for what to put out. So you'll often see artists post a bunch of music that has not been released on TikTok as a way to figure out which song they should actually release. So you kind of do this like online A&R experience in hopes of a viral moment that you can then turn into a 12-month long campaign around a hit song. Um, in this extremely saturated environment, you have it's hard to know how how much attention you have from your fan base. So these streaming platforms have come up with something called pre-save. So if you've probably been asked by your favorite artist to pre-save an album that they have coming out. Basically, you're committing to listen to the song the day that it comes out. It gets added to your library. You log into your Spotify 4 weeks before. You say, yes, I'm gonna, pre-save Chappell Roan's new single. And then the day it comes out, you get it dropped into your music library or notified on your Spotify that it's here. The reason that they're doing that is it gives them data to prove to the Spotifys of the world that they should get as much promotional real estate or editorial playlisting visibility as that they should be, that they've got proof that this song is wanted by fans. So in the old days, record labels were advocating to the gatekeepers at radio for their artists to be played on the radio. The equivalent of that now is playlists on Spotify. So these record labels are doing these huge pre-save campaigns, announcing records 6, 9, 12 months before they're actually out, doing a what they call a waterfall release where they're putting out more and more and more and more content and trying to pull you back into their streaming algorithm, all in hopes that they can have this data that they can say to Spotify, hey, we have, 500,000 people committed to pre-saving Chappell Roan's new album. We want the cover of, New Music Friday, or we want you to put us on the front of Spotify. The reality is like these campaigns are expensive, they're laborious, they take a lot of time. It's something that's really hard for an independent artist to pull off. Um, and then lastly, like something that you're always going to see. This has been true for a long time, but it used to be that record labels just took a piece of the music, so they were only making money if the song was a hit or the album sold in record stores. But now they take a piece of almost every part of the artist's business if you're signing a major label, signing to a major label. So um, touring is one of those parts of that was one of those revenue streams that major labels are participating in, and they will build audiences in very specific markets um, to prove demand for their artists. they'll overspend on advertising. They'll get local businesses and radio people to play or expose the artist's music. Um, so like that's another easy way to these record labels can like oversaturate a market really quickly. And then lastly, you look at somebody like Beyonce, who on recent albums has put out essentially full movies alongside her music, right? Full visual albums, a music video for every single song that's released, a documentary to go with it. You see Billie Eilish and Taylor Swift putting out full length docs and behind the scenes movies with Disney Plus, and it's just like a video based world. And so these record labels have turned into a almost like a full film studio, a full production studio, all centering usually around video content like the music video. Um, but again, something else that it's hard to compete with if you're an independent artist. So what would I do if I was marketing somebody from scratch? If I was marketing an artist from the beginning, where would I focus? Um, Building that audience is really the hardest part. I think one of the things that's extremely important, again, disclaimer, after you've worked on making really great music, is being really clear on who this music is for. So you need to be very specific about who your ideal audience is, and not just who they are, but maybe where they listen and what else they listen to, and what else they have going on in their world, and what part of life they're in, and then where they exist online. Like I said at the beginning, music is deeply personal to each of us, and it takes a ton of digging and research, but it's I've seen a lot of artists have this sort of idea or romantic idea about who they think their audience is, and they spend a lot of years marketing to somebody that's actually not listening. Um, and the reality of the internet now is it's very niche. So I say here niche down aggressively because every time you post on Instagram, every time you post on TikTok, the algorithm is trying to find people who care about that piece of content and put it in front of them. So if you're telling it this is for um, Chapel Roan fans in Chicago who also like the Cubs and love cooking. That's like an over exaggerated example. But if you've built your fan personas and you understand really who this is for, you can sort of be the most popular artist in a group of 10,000 people, as opposed to trying to compete with the millions. I think there was a related to this. I think there was a question um, that I've worked in here about touring and how to attract booking agents. I said this before, but I think when I've seen artists establish themselves, when I've seen artists attract booking agents or venues to book or promoters, it's when they've narrowed in on a geographic anchor, a geographic area that they can really, really dominate. So once you've done some research on who's going to listen to my music, it's probably worth also looking at like where they live and experimenting with um, who you think the audience is in those places. And if you, I would rather you. I was just talking to a band that does not have huge social numbers, and it does matter if you have social numbers. A booking agent will want to see that there's audience. But I saw somebody, it was a band from Boston. I don't know if anybody knows this band called oh, I'm gonna forget the name of it. They had 5,000 Instagram followers, but they can sell tickets in central Massachusetts. And so that shows demand, and it's something that the booking agents think that they can recreate elsewhere. So my advice is own your local scene first before you try to be somewhere else. In terms of marketing yourself as an artist early on, the best return on investment I've ever gotten on marketing is from really good organic content. By organic content, I mean content that is just there's no sales to it, there's no paid advertising to it, it's not influencer based, it's shareable, it's fun, it's personality, it's engaging. All of the content for artists that have all of the content that you've seen go viral, or the artists who have gone viral, these artists have likely created an organic content machine on their own, and they've likely been posting for 6, 9, 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, over and over and over again to really figure out what content is going to resonate, um, what content they can recreate over and over again. My company does paid advertising. We buy ad space for artists on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. And it's never as good results as um, if you can break through on that social feed with something engaging and organic. It's always going to return you more followers. It's always going to return you more comments and visibility. Another thing that most people don't know is that the social media platforms actually share their new tools and products on a regular basis. So you can actually go and look on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram's website and understand what new uh, group chat or share tool or story option or link sticker that they're creating to try to get fans to engage and stay on their platforms for longer. So what I would do is be very clear and looking regularly at what those product updates are on social platforms, and use them, because it's usually a hack. The social platforms want you to participate in them, and they'll often reward you for using their new products. Um, I'll also say, I think, like, right now, live content is the most shareable music content that I see. It's usually the most lucrative. People will fans of music usually end up at the live show, right? So they want to know if what they're seeing online translates to the stage, and if you can communicate that from the beginning, it's usually pretty powerful, and it's usually pretty effective for building an online following. So if you're able to create live content, I think that's a great place to start um, building an audience. Other ways, collaborating with other artists, other podcasters, other people locally in the market that you're trying to penetrate, easy. Um, and then I would, if you're an indie artist, there's free tools for this. I can share some. Uh, uh, Capturing emails and SMS from the beginning of your career is pretty crucial. I have a lot of big artists who are 3, 5 years in, who kick themselves from not just collecting emails at their concerts from over the years, and they probably would have had hundreds of thousands of fans that they could have communicated with directly, and they didn't do it. So we know that TikTok could disappear at any moment. So um, the workaround and the hack to that is have an email list that you can access. And then I'm always a fan of uh, the artists like Taylor Swift. There's stories that back in the day she was messaging and emailing with the 1,000 people that were in her first Facebook group, and those people love that one-on-one attention, and they become advocates of you forever. They become a megaphone for you because you engage with them directly. So it's also an opportunity to, like, really learn about who your fan is, because you're having, like, a real personal conversation with them, and you would be shocked at the things you can learn about how you can market to those fans by just speaking to them like other people one on one. um I got a couple more slides here, but some things I would be thinking about for how we're continuing to market artists in the future. I believe that I think that everybody's going to start tuning out of social media platforms. I think we're already sort of seeing this, where people are deleting their apps or going offline, and these labels and these content machines will continue to flood them and oversaturate them with content. So it's going to be harder and harder to break through. So I'm a huge fan of building your email and text and contact information from the beginning of your career, instead of relying on these platforms to speak with your fans. I sort of talked doom and gloom about AI at the beginning, we're about to see some interesting user experiences on streaming platforms around AI. I'm not really sure how it's going to go, but there's going to be a world on Spotify where you can interact with your favorite music, and there will be sort of an online collaborative aspect of how you stream. So you're asking it to make the song sound a certain way, or mix it with a certain mood, or play it during a certain party. Think about maybe some of your favorite songs, but hey, I'd like them to be in the style of piano jazz for the cocktail party that I'm about to have. Crazy things like that are about to come. And I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's also going to be very weird. The hope is that we can make money off of it for artists and it will actually be profitable. Um, Sort of finishing up here, I think that uh, the experiences around concerts and exclusive experiences that artists can offer their fans is going to be the real product. If streaming is a loss leader, it's going to be an advertisement that gets you to pay for a ticket to an event where you'll buy a bunch of merch, or a monthly live stream that only you are invited to. I think that's fun, but exclusive experiences and the experience economy, I think, is the opportunity here. Um, and then lastly, I was gonna practice what I preach. A couple of memorable campaigns to finish up from my marketing career. I talked about using those new platform updates from social media platforms to leverage for visibility. When I worked with Blake Shelton and Kelly Clarkson at Starstruck, the management company, we did one of the first Facebook Lives. This was a time when live streaming was like very, very new. Twitter had a live stream app called Periscope, if anybody remembers that. And nobody really knew how to use it yet, but we used Facebook Live on Blake and Kelly's Facebooks to announce that Kelly was joining the Voice. And because it was the first of its kind, it got some free press out of it, and it kind of broke through. So I always think about that as a way to take a risk on a new tool or a new feature on social platforms, because it usually will pay off. Another way that I've used fan data and used it to create exclusive access to artists. We did a campaign where this band All Time Low hung up a bunch of posters around a show. It was actually in Boston. Hung up a bunch of posters in a venue, and if you called the phone number, you heard this voice that ended up being the character from the upcoming music video and single that they were about to put out. So this was the first time any of these fans were hearing about this. They didn't know the music was even coming, but it was like a nice surprise. It was a nice way for people already in venue at a show to get something exclusive. And we got their phone numbers and emails usually out of them calling. So it was a way to capture those most meaningful artists. Um, and then this wonderful sister duo, Lark and Poe, um, we worked really hard at building up their audience data over the years. They have a huge international audience, and we found out that we could identify fans during a couple off days that they had in London in between shows. We could identify fans who had bought tons and tons of merch over the years and had pre-saved their upcoming album. So what they did was they invited this very high value, engaged group of fans to an exclusive performance. Those fans shared it like crazy. It was a way to reward them for their loyalty over the years. And we never posted about it on social media. So that's sort of like another example of how you can use this community, this artist community, this direct to fan philosophy to create something meaningful for your audience. And then I found the earliest photo I could possibly find of my musical career at Gov. So here's the Performing Arts Center. And like I said earlier, I probably would not be doing what I'm doing now if it weren't for the arts program, the music program at Gov. So I am forever grateful for that.
Jeremy, that was awesome. My local public music radio station that I listen to is in the middle of a fund drive right now, and I'm already a member, but you're making me want to just give them more money just to sort of like continue to help independent, smaller artists keep getting out there. So that's one of my takeaways from this whole thing. So that the money side of it is crazy and just breaking in is nuts. We do have some questions. I did completely forget at the beginning to mention, for those of you who asked questions when you registered, we have those, but down at the bottom there's a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A and we'll get to those. The first one kind of goes off of how you just ended, Jeremy. Like, can you talk a little bit more about how your own musicality informed your business?
That's a good question. I think that it's difficult to, first of all, market music that maybe you're not a listener of. So I think playing a lot of different types of music, like morning meeting band, and this, I'm using the Govs example here, but morning meeting band versus orchestra versus jazz band, um, it's three very different listener experiences. And I think I'm kind of like an equal opportunity listener. And so that has translated well into my business because I think I can put myself in the shoes of the ideal fan for my clients and try to empathize with like why they like the music and experience that a little bit for myself. It's also just like you can appreciate it more because you know what it's like creating the songs that they did or working on the production that they did. You know how much creativity and effort goes into it. And it's also like a part of Nashville. Like you're so close in proximity to songwriters and studio musicians and the artists that proximity creates um that proximity creates like I think a want to make um artists win, and you realize, like, you see up close, like how hard it is to be a full-time musician. um so yeah.
Can you do a little bit of a timeline? Like, if an artist has a new release coming out and some kind, like, when does the promotion start for that? And then, like, how long would an artist maybe contract with you? And would you work with them on that?
Yeah. um we will, I'm pulling this up. Can you see my screen again? So I kind of created we kind of created this flow where an artist can kind of jump in at any point in their cycle. Most of the time, the traditional approach is you're putting out individual songs to sort of build momentum, build awareness for a new project, and while you're putting out those individual singles, you're messaging that an album is coming. Um, if we went to Spotify, I don't know that I have screen sharing access to Spotify, but we were talking about like pre-saves earlier. Let's see if I can find somebody that's doing a pre-save. Um, Spotify has now created these mechanisms where you can let fans know that a full album is coming, and um, they'll sign up to get that full album along the way if they listen to the individual songs along the way. So I said to say they're usually putting out individual singles. They're putting that album out with, another 5, 10 tracks. And then most of the time they're going to tour on that album because that's where, you've built this momentum with a bunch of music, and then you can get people to be excited about seeing it in person. That can take anywhere from a year to, like, some of these major artists are dragging that out with longer and longer tours over like 2, 3 years. So promoting it I'm referencing this slide here because one of the things that my company will do is we'll use the hit songs that already exist in this artist's catalog. Catalog meaning anything 18 months or older. And we will do some marketing. We'll put out a bunch of content. We'll get fans. We'll give their fan base some maybe exclusive content that they haven't had before off of an old hit as a way to spike some algorithmic visibility to like get the Spotify listenership up a little bit to get fans like warmed up, if you will. And we'll probably do that 90 days before a first single comes out. So we'll spend a couple of months reminding fans why they loved this artist and those hits, and then we'll say, hey, by the way, new song is coming. Now that you're paying attention, here's a new piece of music. And usually it's two, three, four singles and then an album. But there are some artists who just never stop. They don't kind of fit that cycle model. They're just kind of doing single, single, single over and over and over again and touring in the meantime. But yeah, usually it's usually like a 12-month, 18-month process traditionally.
How would you advise a young artist to stay true to their music instead of focusing on getting famous? Do you have any words of wisdom on that?
I think the fact that you're asking that question means that you probably can do that. Like I think that if you're not if you were you probably wouldn't say I just want to be famous. I don't care about who I am. And if you did say that, it probably wouldn't work out, right? I think that the beautiful thing about the democratization of music, the fact that we can all make music and put it on Spotify, we can all, record something in GarageBand, is that we all have that opportunity to create a platform. The downside of that is uh, anybody can create music and put it on the internet, and that sort of floods these platforms and floods. There's plenty of bad stuff. So I think that the artists that stay true to themselves focus on what they want to hear and what they want to listen to. They're not creating music for somebody on Instagram. They're not creating music for the record label. They're not creating music for anybody other than themselves. And usually that creates the most authentic, um, real expression of who they are. Um, I think people's BS meters are pretty good when it comes to music. You kind of like it or you don't. So if you make music that you're really excited about, um, people will people will believe you. And I think that's where it starts. How's that?
I think that's very fair. If you're not liking it, other people aren't going to like it either. So,
Music you want to make.
what data points do you look at most closely when you're sort of tracking and figuring out the work that you're doing?
Great question. I mentioned these, like I said, CRM tool and how there's all these artist tools available now. Um, we use a tool called OpenStage that is like $20 a month, and you can start uploading emails and SMS to it, phone numbers to it. I keep saying SMS. If you're noticing, you're probably getting more texts from brands these days and artists and things like that. It's just, again, it's less saturated. It's not the busy social media feed. Um, these data platforms do an amazing job of telling us where the person is. I can look at if I have my Shopify account or my e-commerce store, I can look at everything you've ever purchased. I can look at, depending on how much touring access I have, and this is probably most important, merch and touring is a pretty good indicator, how have you spent your money, of their loyalty to the artist. And then um, you kind of start with you just kind of start with geography. Usually we're usually using geography to run advertising for tours or to inform yeah, like if I'm marketing a record around a 50-day tour in the United States, I can run ads in all of those markets. And if I know, Boston has a way higher concentration, then I can spend more money there and not waste money in Chicago. So it's about geography because that also leads to demand for ticket sales, which gets you more touring, which puts a lot of money in your pocket, which makes people, you know, show up and stream your music more. But then it's also a lot of, yeah, it's a lot of like money. How are you spending your money on this artist? Um, and you can really see a lot of that now with some of these technologies. The other interesting thing that it does, I think, is really important for fans to do. I said like talk one on one to your fans. Um, I'm seeing artists like survey their fans constantly about their music. So like, hey, I had this hit record. What's your favorite song? Or what would you have liked it if I used this artwork instead? Or let's reorder the track listing of the album. How would you do it? And you can get these really interesting, like interactive personality points about your fans. And so it's just like interesting stuff gets revealed about them when you say, like, tell me about the first time you listened to this hit song. And you get these amazing stories, and it's inspo for marketing campaigns. It sometimes like gives you an opportunity to like engage with those fans directly or surprise them with something or add value or do something that's like really shareable and show up on the doorstep like Taylor Swift used to do. Um, so you can surprisingly get pretty intimate about how these artists have like how these fans have connected with you over the years and then use that for more storytelling or for more creative interaction. But yeah, there's a lot that you can learn, and that's why it being in all these different silos on streaming platforms and on social media platforms is bad for indie artists because we want to know who's streaming the music. We want to know where they are, um, so that we can give them more.
That's actually super interesting because my husband watches like some people like on YouTube, and it's usually like home improvement-y stuff, but there's this one woman that poses questions all the time and it drives me bonkers. But now I'm getting why she's doing it. It's just like
Ah,
trying to learn about what the audio, like, what color would you paint this room? Just goofy
yeah,
things like that. And I'm like, why do you care what we think? So, but now this makes a lot more sense, Jeremy.
yeah.
Um, I have one more question. You talked a lot about like where you think the industry might be going. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like when you first started, like sort of what your
Mm,
own journey has been? I'm imagining it's changed a ton in this time.
yeah, that's a good question. So when I was in college, I can remember Instagram had just launched. It was Facebook. Obviously, MySpace had its moment. YouTube was sort of around, but it was like weird videos and some instructional stuff. People hadn't really like caught onto the full breadth of YouTube yet. And Instagram was where all of like the younger, cool, it seemed like audiences were going. So when I was working with artists early on, we were like hyper focusing on Instagram because that's where the attention was. That's where, TikTok is where it is now. But where's the young person looking? Where is that attention? That's usually the place where you can get people to look at you. So at the time it was Instagram, and looking back, um, I mean, I probably wish YouTube, I think, is the long-term winner here. I think that like Google and again data that they've got is really powerful, and YouTube doesn't have to make their music platform work for it to exist. So they can make it great and not have to sell out to advertisers like maybe Instagram and Facebook have to. So at the time, it was only Instagram, and we were just making funny videos that we knew fans would laugh at, and it's sort of the same principles of like what would break through, but obviously like at the time it was all photo and images. Really, there was barely video, which is crazy to think about because it's all video now. Um, but yeah, I was just like taking GoPro content and making Instagram videos, and that's kind of where that's kind of where it started.
And look at you now, owning your own business. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and for giving us so much to think about and understanding this crazy market from the back end of things, which we all know
Mhm.
exists, but not necessarily to the depth of it. So appreciate all of your insight. Thank you again.
Thank you for having
Um,
me.
in April, we're going to take a break from Passion and Practice. We have a webinar with Dr. Quimby, a fireside chat for alumni, but you will see us back soon, and I'm looking forward to it. So I hope our paths cross either on screen or in person sometime soon. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.